I ended up having to update my list because I actually had to throw a few things on there that weren't on the original list. So this is the new list. And so far, got motor mounts in, front control arms upper, front control arms lower, front sway bar, tie rods done. So I've still got to put in the factory fuel adapters, which I decided I'm going to use those steel braided lines that came with the fuel pressure regulator. So what I did is I bought me some of these. They clip on to the factory fuel rail so that you can screw in a fitting. So basically it'll look like this now under the hood instead of just having those hydraulic hoses, which I guess I'm just being a little bit of a snob, but I mean there's a little bit of pride in making sure that everything looks good. But basically that's what it'll look like on the fuel rail now. So that'll be done here in a few minutes. But what I'm going to work on next is doing the oil filter change and trans fluid change. And to do that, my lovely wife for Father's Day bought me an oil caddy, which I think is probably one of the best presents I have gotten in a long time. It's like 50 bucks from Harbor Freight, and I should have got one of these things a long time ago. And I had a little piece of, I think this came from a computer or something like that. I found it in the recycle bin at work, but I basically just cut it, and what it does is it keeps debris from getting down inside there, or it keeps you from like dropping your drain plug and getting it down in there. It just keeps it up above the fluid. So definitely using that for the oil change and trans fluid change. So making a lot of progress, but it's still not quite done yet. Look how awesome this is to have a oil caddy. I just can't even. Why I didn't buy this like 2 years ago, I don't know. Look at this. Oh, it's awesome. Oh, yay. Can make a mess. Well, I guess it's not making a mess, and that's what's the beautiful thing. And my oil filter of choice, because AutoZone had a fabulous special, I've always put Mobil 1 5W30 in it, but I'm using a Mobil 1 extended performance filter, just because if you buy that filter with the oil, you get like a $8 off, which I would buy a good filter anyway, especially now that I've got the turbos hanging out in the back. And there's the potential for a little extra debris to get in there. So, man, this is just super nice. It's like doing an oil change in a shop now. I'm also doing a transmission fluid change. Not necessarily because the transmission fluid is old or anything, because I changed the tranny fluid to royal purple something or other whenever the car had, I think it was 75,000 miles on it. But the trouble is that it shifts like crap. Ever since I've had this particular trans fluid in it, it's awful. So I'm going back to the factory Dexron 3. So that's what I got. I got Dexron 3 to replace it with. And I can't remember what the royal purple stuff was. It was like royal purple 7590 trans fluid or something. It's just too thick. It doesn't work. So tired of it, and I've got to put trans fluid in it anyway, because whenever I disconnected the trans cooler lines, a whole bunch of it leaked out. Probably a quart, maybe more, leaked out. So I'm just putting regular old Dexron 3 back in it next. It's actually stamped on the side of the transmission right next to the fill hole. Use Dexron 3, ATF only. So that's what's going back in it. Oil and filter change, check. Trans fluid change, check. Now on to the spark plugs. So the spark plugs I chose are actually AC Delco 41-104. There's the GM part number. And you can see these are Japan, so they're probably NKGs or NGKs or something like that. But the reason I chose this particular one is, yeah, that's a that actually is a NGK part number. The reason I chose these is because these are the ones that they put in the LS9 from the factory. These are iridium spark plugs, which is just the material that the electrode's made out of to give them more durability. And so what I'm doing is, instead of using one of these things, what I'm doing is I'm putting it in my vise really gently, finding one of the diamond plates that lines up with the end of the dealie, and I've got a set of feeler gauges here. And so what I've got is, this would be, these two together would be 0.33, and what I want is a 0.35 gap. They're coming from the factory, or they're coming out of the box at 0.41, so I just want a little bit tighter of a gap. So what I'm doing is, I'm putting it at 0.33, putting my feeler gauge down in there, and then I'm basically pinching it until it closes on the 0.33. Then whenever it closes down on the 0.33, and then I take these two, which would be 0.35, it's working out to be just about perfect. They fit in there just a little snug. Yeah. Well, maybe just a little bit more, but that's how I'm gapping my spark plugs, because it's really hard to open them up if you over gap them, but it's pretty easy to pinch them down. So I'm just taking my time and doing them slow and sure like that. So I've already got 2 of them done. But that's the gap I'm using, and those are the spark plugs I'm using. These are supposed to be 1 heat range colder than the factory spark plugs that I have in the Corvette. I replaced the spark plugs and wires at about 60,000 or 70,000 miles. So it's definitely due for another set. Plus I wanted colder ones, and I wanted a smaller gap. So that's what I'm doing for my spark plugs. So here's my old spark plugs. They've probably got 40,000 miles on them, and you can see that's the part number that I had before. So new one in, torquing it down. The spec on spark plugs is 11 foot-pounds. Which ain't very tight. But because it's an aluminum head, I just don't want to cause it problems and strip it out, because I've learned that my snug is about 25 or 30 foot-pounds is what I feel is snug. Tight is about 60 foot-pounds for me. When you've been doing it as long as I have, you just kind of learn these things. And they've already got dielectric grease down in there from the last set. So these are factory replacement wires. I didn't go with anything fancy like MSD or anything. They're just the regular old AC Delco wires. And they've worked fine so far. I'm just gonna keep chugging. Spark plugs, done. Now I just need to get these adapters put on for the fuel system to put that steel braided line and get this T in for the fuel pressure regulator. Here's my fuel pressure regulator set up. So I've got my vacuum reference teed in down there to the reference that goes all the way over there, and it tees in back here. I've got my steel braided lines, got my adapters in there on both of them. So kind of happy with how it looks. It's kind of discreet, tucked away. So and I'm not sure if the cover is gonna fit, but I haven't had them on in a while anyway. So that's done. Steel braided fuel lines, factory adapters, check. Teed into the vacuum lines, check. Yep.